Hello, once again. This is going to be my second video with beginner tactics. I realized I just finished my first video. It's uploading right now to YouTube, and I did 40 puzzles in 1 hour. And that's 40 puzzles in 1 hour with explanations. I could do a lot more if I was just trying my best, but I wanted to explain. That's the point of making a video, is to explain it to your audience. And so, but I also realized that some of these were semi-complicated. They all were under 1,000, but sometimes I debate the validity of the rating. If it's a 3-move, 4-move sequence, that's kind of complicated for a beginner, or an ultimate beginner if you're just getting started. And so my first video was puzzles under 1,000. I'm going to change that and do puzzles under 500. So it should be a lot easier, and I should be able to do more than 40 in 1 hour. So if I'll once again go to puzzles, and so I'm just learning from it was still a good video, I think, the way I did the 40 puzzles in 1 hour, but I just feel like some were a little complicated. I did explain every one of them, but I'm going to do, so again, go to learning, puzzles, learning. I did rating 1 to 1,000. I'm going to reduce that to 500. And so the puzzle should be even easier than the first video. I'm just kind of learning from my first video. And so this will ultimately be the easier for the beginner, video 2. So all these should be pretty basic. We'll see how it goes. But I realized that under 1,000 was still required. A few of them were kind of tricky. These should be a little more straightforward now that we've reduced the difficulty by half. All right, let's get to it. 58 minutes. I'm going to do an hour video. 58 minutes. Let's see how many we can get done. Okay. All right, this is a bishop can come here. Check. And it's actually checkmate. It's actually a mate in 1. It's checkmate because this bishop goes here. If this bishop will go here, essentially it's like a scissor. I call it the scissor position when the two bishops scissor in that way. And so, and the knight cannot block because the knight's pinned. The king will be in check by the rook. So this is just checkmate in 1. Covering that, and the knight cannot block because of the rook. So checkmate in 1. Yep. Okay. So this bishop is only defended once. This rook, remember every move by the computer initially is a bad move. And so this rook moving over here, the rook had to move over here because I was threatening checkmate. Okay? But that allows me now to pick off this bishop. The bishop is only defended once by the queen, but I'm attacking it twice. Also, once I take it, I'm threatening checkmate again. So the queen's going to have to sacrifice itself to stop the checkmate. So rook takes bishop is the answer. Yeah, the queen has to stop the mate. And then I win a queen for a rook. And I want a bishop too, so I want a lot. All right. Okay. Check. King moves down, and I have checkmate. Okay. So if the only way to stop this checkmate is to block with the rook, which means I win a free rook. So black has a choice. Checkmate. Yeah, moving down here and checkmate. Mate in 2. But like I said, if he had blocked with the rook, I win the rook. Plus, it just delays the inevitable, I think. No, because I no longer have the checkmating square because the queen. So he can stop the mate at the cost of sacrificing a rook. He didn't make the best move, but either way, lose the king or lose the rook, either way is bad. Okay. Okay, so the only thing defending this was a bad move by white because the pawn was defending the rook. Now only the king is defending the rook, and I'm attacking. So I just move the rook over, check. Once the king moves out of the way, I pick off the rook. So this is called a skewer. Check and pick off the rook. And that should be a win. So if you're watching this video first, this is my second video, but if you're watching this video first, the point of these puzzles is to get a checkmate or win a piece. So, which are, winning a piece is the means to an end to help you eventually get checkmate. Checkmate's the ultimate goal, but if you sometimes you don't have checkmate, so winning a piece is the next best thing. All right, queen can come down here, check, and then also attacking the rook. This is called a fork. So a double attack, check, wins the rook. Okay, this is a mate in 2. Rook here, check. It's defended by the pawn. This rook is over here. King has to move over here, and then this rook can come over, checkmate. One more time, check. King moves here or here, and then this rook here is checkmate. Check, checkmate. Okay, this is just a version of the scholar's mate. You have a queen attacking this pawn, and you have a bishop attacking this pawn. The f2 pawn and the f7 pawn are the weakest pawns in the camp because they're only defended by the king initially. So if you can get 2 pieces attacking it, you can launch an attack. This is a beginner. This is called a scholar's mate essentially, where the queen moves up. This is checkmate. The king has nowhere to go and cannot take the queen because of the bishop. So this is something that beginners learn is the 4-move the 4-move checkmate, which is also known as the scholar's mate. So that was a mate. That was a checkmate in 1. Okay, this bishop is in direct line of the queen, so all the rook has to do is move out of the way with check. Black has to respond to the check, probably by taking my rook, and then I win the queen. The queen is worth 9 points, and the rook is worth 5 points. So yeah, I said this in the first video, but pawns are worth 1, knights and bishops are worth 3, rooks are worth 5, and queens are worth 9. So you have to do math when you're calculating all this to know that you came out ahead and equal or behind in the end. So in this case, I'm sacrificing a 5-point piece because it's check to win a 9-point piece. So it's a sacrifice and a discovered attack on the queen. Okay, this is an endgame puzzle. This seems innocent enough, but going here versus going here can have drastic consequences. One will be a win and one will probably be a draw. So, or maybe not. Maybe in this case it doesn't matter. If I go here, attacking the pawn, he has to defend it. The only way to defend it is here. And then I defend my pawn. Or no. Yeah, he's defending his pawn but also attacking my pawn. So then my king goes here. And now this is called a Zugzwang, which is German for compelled to move. Black doesn't want to move, but he has to move. And then when he moves, I can pick off the pawn, and then I'll get a queen eventually. So in this case it doesn't matter. I can go here or here, but I hate when they do this because, well, no, it might matter because he doesn't have to initially go here. Except now that I explained that to you, me going here, if he goes here, I go here, and then no matter where his king moves, I win the pawn. But he doesn't have to go here. So that's where it matters. If I go down here, he doesn't go here. If I go here, he goes here instead. I don't know. But then I can still move down. And then the pawn's lost. So here, but by going here though, it prevents him from being able to move here. So then he has to go here. I think the result doesn't matter, but since this is a computer, it probably chose the more forceful approach. as the correct answer. So I'm going to move here because it forces him to go here to defend the pawn, and then I go here. And that's, yeah. No matter where the king moves, I'm going to pick off the black pawn. And then my king can assist the pawn to victory. But if we go back, if I go here, it might say it's wrong. Yeah, it says it's wrong, but honestly, okay. Wait, oh, well, he still has to defend the black pawn. So he has to go here or here. Oh, no, wait. And if he goes here, I go here. And no matter where he goes, he's going to lose the black pawn. Oh, okay. This is actually complex for beginners. I'm not sure why they included this. I got the puzzle right initially, but the problem is if the king can get in front of the pawn, he can actually stop the pawn from becoming a queen, and then it's a draw. Where I win the pawn, but I don't win the game. So if I go here, he goes here. Then I go here, then he goes here, actually. Then if I take the pawn, he goes directly in front of my king, and then I cannot win. So this is actually complex for a beginner. So just kind of disregard this puzzle if it was a little too complicated for you, but this is an endgame puzzle. So actually it does matter. It does matter. In the end, going here versus going here determines the game. One's a win and one's a draw. By doing the forceful one, by going here, he cannot get up here in front of the pawn. So by going here, the only way to defend the pawn is to go back. And then I'm going to go here. And then when he moves out of the way, I capture the pawn. The difference between the two positions, I'm going to win the pawn no matter what. The difference is the king is here versus here in the end. And if the king is in front of the pawn, it's a little more complicated, but that's how you win the game. You don't want the enemy king in front of the pawn trying to stop it, because it can be a draw. So that's a little complex. Let's move on, but hopefully that made sense. Okay, so yeah, you have to go here, then here, and then I'm going to win the pawn. He moves here, I take pawn. He tries to go around, okay? But since he's not already there, it's just too late. My king's going to move here, and eventually here, and then the king supports all three of these squares. The king will support the pawn promotion. All right, that was complex. All right, especially for a beginner. I spent too much time on that puzzle, but it's more complex. And it says it's 286 difficulty. Endgame puzzles are tricky. It should not be 286. So I got it right. I said it initially that I don't think it matters, but it could matter. But I was wrong. This is the win, and this was the draw. So, okay, just take the rook check. King moves back, and I have checkmate. Yeah, didn't require me to finish it. Pretty simple. Boom, checkmate. If I take, he just takes back, nothing special. So I move up here, check, and the king will have to sever the connection of the rooks. If it goes here, I take rook, and then when he takes, no matter which rook he decides to take, I will take the other rook. If he goes back, then I take. So one more time. Check, king here, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, rook takes rook. In the end, I will have a rook. And if he decides to move here instead, this rook is no longer defended. I can take it with check, followed by winning the other rook anyway. It's even worse. I win 2 rooks. Check, he moved here, yeah. Yeah, in the end, I won a rook. This is just a simple back rank checkmate. Check, checkmate. I explained this in the last video about not be careful about your king being hemmed in by your pawns. You need to create Luft, which is German for the word air. Creating Luft for your king, where one of these three pawns is moved, giving air for your king to get out of these potential checkmates. Okay, this is a knight fork. Knight here, check. Also wins the bishop that's undefended. Boom. And the knight's not trapped because it has this nice square to go back to that's defended by a bishop. If he attempts to like attack the knight, trying to get the piece back, I'll retreat. And then I just got the piece. So and this is checkmate in 1. Queen takes pawn, checkmate. Queen's defended by the rook. It's funny how how chess works, because initially the rook can't take because it's pinned to the king. Okay, the rook cannot legally move, but it can legally defend from that square, which is weird. Because if you think about it, and if this were a real battle, because the object of the game is to whoever checkmates the king first wins. It doesn't matter if after checkmate your king is going to die. Sometimes it's one move too late. So in real life that would be like a draw. If I kill the enemy king, but then my king dies right afterwards, in the end both armies are without a king. But in chess, it's whoever does it first. So this is checkmate, because you cannot legally take the queen, because then the rook would take. It won't take. You're not allowed to put your king in check. So even though, let's say this was legal, if you were able to take the queen, rook takes king, and then queen takes king. So both kings would die, but his king dies first. So this is checkmate because he's not allowed to put his king in check. All right, knight here is a smothered mate. That pawn was the only defense to the square. Smothered checkmate. Ooh, this is a nice little rook trap. I cannot save this pawn. I can't promote yet. I can't promote because the rook will take. But if I move the bishop here, check. If the rook cannot take, because then I get my queen. So then the king's just going to take this pawn or something, and then the bishop moves there, and it's blocking, and then the pawn will promote. If rook takes, pawn takes, then I get my queen. And if rook doesn't take, I'll get the queen here instead. So check followed by here, and then I got two squares for my pawn. Check. He took it in this case, so I get my queen. But like I said, even if he didn't, the bishop would go here. All right, this is mate in 2. It's kind of similar in this case, though. Yeah, this is I told you the f2 pawn and the f7 pawns are the weakest in the beginning. So queen comes up here. It's not checkmate right away because the queen is not there anymore. The king has an escape square, but then you have mate the very next move. So check and mate. Okay, this is a remove the defender. Rook takes check. The only way to get the piece back. This is called an overworked piece. The queen has too many jobs. The queen is defending this rook. The queen is also defending this rook. And because it's check, if he wants to get the piece back, queen takes and is no longer defending this rook, allowing me to win this rook afterwards. So takes, and then I get the undefended rook. Overloading or overworked piece is the same thing. Okay. Bishop takes rook check. The only way you get out of check is for the rook to take. And then queen takes checkmate. That's forced. Mate in 2. Forced. Don't have to consider other options. When your opponent only has one legal move, it makes the tree branches a lot easier. Oh, that's a cool checkmate. Bishop here, bishop here is checkmate. It's kind of that same scissor, bishop scissor action. So bishop here is checkmate. This is covered. The bishops cover these 3 squares, and my king covers these 2 squares. And the king is checkmated. Doesn't look obvious at first, but yeah. Bishops work well together. They're a good team. Okay. I could take this pawn check, but it's just a pawn. This is a knight fork. Knight here check, wins the rook. Okay, took my queen. Okay. It might be logical. It would seem logical to take the queen back. But why take the queen when you can take the king? This is checkmate. The knight defends this square. These are definitely a lot easier than the previous video. So I would recommend watching video 2, this video 2 first, and then watching video 1 if you are a beginner and trying to improve. Because even some of these below 500 require complicated explanations. This is a mate in 2, check, rook blocks, take a checkmate, back rank mate again. A lot of these puzzles are more forced. There's less possibilities, more forcing sequences, so it's less for me to think about. Okay. Ooh. I like this one. This is a sacrifice. Okay, so this is called something you need to know about endgames. It's called the square of the pawn. The square of the pawn is how many more squares to promote. Make a square. Okay. If the enemy king is not in that square, it cannot reach the pawn. And as you can see, the enemy king is outside the square of this pawn. Okay, that's something you just need to know is the square of the pawn. Imagine the rooks were gone, and the pawns were gone, and it was just this black pawn and this white king. And no matter whose move it is, even if it was white's move first, he still doesn't get within the square of the pawn, because every time the pawn moves forward, the square is going to get smaller and smaller. And so ignore the other pieces. If it's black to move, pawn, just ignore the other pieces. King, pawn, king, he's too far away to stop it. And even if it was his move, he's one square too far away. Here, pawn moves, closer, pawn moves, closer, and he's one too far away. I get my queen. He has to be within the square of the pawn. The king has to be here already, and then can move inside the square. Not necessarily inside the square, but including the border, to be clear. You have to be in the square or on the square to stop the pawn. Because if he moves here, if he was here and he moved here, then pawn, okay, so let's just say the king was here instead and moved here within the square of the pawn. Then pawn goes up, king moves here, pawn goes up, king moves here. I get my queen, but then king is there. King is close enough to capture it in the end. The king can stop the pawn. So that's the concept of the square of the pawn. But that's the concept of the square of the pawn if there was no other pieces on the board. But we got rooks on the board, so we can't do that. This pawn can't promote because there's a rook in the way. Is there a way we could get rid of the rook? The answer, yes. Rook up check. It's forking the king and the rook. If the king moves out of the way, you just win the rook, and then it's just easy. You're going to get it's his last piece, and you're going to get a queen. Moving here forces him to trade the rooks off. I take, he takes back, and then all the pieces just got exchanged. And then I push my pawn, and he's too far away to promote, to stop my promotion. So check, takes, see? And now it looks a little more clear. We forced the exchange of the rooks. I had to sacrifice a pawn, but look at this square. Now it's a little more obvious. And he's outside the square of the pawn because it's my move. If it were White's move, then he would jump into the square, but he cannot stop the pawn now. Yeah, see? He goes here, I go here, he goes here, I get a queen. He's not close enough to eat the queen. Let's do that one more time. So I want, if you understand the square of the pawn, which was the complicated concept of this, okay? So rook moves up, check, forking the king and the rook. So it forces the rooks off the board, even though I lose a pawn. But knowing the concept of the square of the pawn, he cannot stop this, and I get a queen, and I can win the game. All right. Endgame puzzles are tricky. I like endgame puzzles. There's very few pieces on the board, but just because there's less pieces on the board doesn't mean the position is easier, necessarily. Sometimes they're just as hard, even though there's less pieces to move. There's a lot of endgame tactics, endgame concepts to learn too, strategies. All right, this is the concept again of the overloading or the overworked piece. This queen is defending this rook, but also defending this bishop. So I can pseudo-sacrifice this 5-point piece for a 3-point piece. If he takes back, he's no longer defending the rook, and I pick off the rook. It's similar to the puzzle before. All right. Definitely going through more puzzles. Almost at 1 per minute with explanations. If I'm going too fast, yeah, like I said in the previous video, feel free to rewind if I'm going too fast. But these are a lot easier. I don't have to think as much. And I'm still explaining them. So, all right, this is the discovered attack. This pawn moves up. It's check to the king. So it's called the discovered check. And then when the king gets out of check, my rook can pick off the queen. Okay? And if the queen blocked, I'd still win the queen because this pawn covers this square. All right. Ooh. This is nice. This is a sacrifice for the checkmate. The king, look at this black king. He has nowhere to move. Okay? I would love my rook to go here. I would love to be able to hop over and give a check. Well, it wouldn't be checkmate because the rook could take me. But if this rook it was not here, my rook could give checkmate. So knight here check, and the king has nowhere to move, so the rook has to take, allowing me to move the rook there. Checkmate, mate in 2. Check, checkmate. Okay, I'm in check, so that limits my options. But it was just okay. This should see these are not in order by difficulty. I'm not doing Puzzle Rush. If I were doing Puzzle Rush, I probably should have done. To be honest, no. The problem with Puzzle Rush is that they get harder and harder and harder and harder, and they're not going to be beginner puzzles after long. They it'll range from beginner puzzles to intermediate to advanced within 30 puzzles. And so in this case, I'm doing only beginner puzzles. So in this case, it's check, but it's just a free piece. This is the easiest one so far. It's just a dumb move. I win a free piece. Hanging piece. Don't move your piece. Yeah, you're just moving your piece to a square where it can just be captured for free. Those are early beginner mistakes. Just oops, lost a piece. Oops, lost a piece. Okay. This is checkmate because the pawn covers this square. So this was a dumb move by black because the rook was stopping the checkmate, but he blocked himself by moving that bishop there. So he allowed the mate in 1. Remember, every move by your computer initially is a bad move. You have to figure out why. One more time. Overload a piece. Queen defending 2 rooks. I take this one with check. Let's start over. I take this one with check. He takes back. And I pick off the other rook with check, followed by winning the knight as well, which is kind of sweet. Trade some rooks. Win this with check. And that was the end of the puzzle, but I'm going to win this knight as well. Wait a minute, actually. I take that back. Taking that knight would be a huge mistake. This ends the puzzle. But taking the knight would be a huge blunder. So say he moves here or here. Well, if he moves here, then I can take the knight because I'm taking the knight with check. So if he moves here instead, I am not taking the knight with check, which would be a huge blunder after winning a rook, because it allows him to move all the way down check, and then I'm the one that's getting checkmated. I block with the bishop and he takes the bishop. Checkmate. So yeah, if he moves here, I cannot take the knight. So then I don't know what I'll do after this, but the point is I won the rook, and that was the end of the puzzle. Be careful. This is a mate in 2. Check. King has to move here. You take the pawn. Checkmate. Oh, he has to move here or here. Either way, my puzzle was correct. Gotta be careful sometimes. I said he only had 1 move, and he technically had 2 moves. I got lucky this time where it didn't matter. I still had the same checkmate, but sometimes it makes all the difference. So I should have realized there was 2 possibilities. But I got lucky this time. It didn't matter whether he moves here or here. Queen takes checkmate. Okay. This looks like a free rook, and it's also forking the rook and the bishop. Yeah, he gets that rook out of the way. Oh, and he's threatening to check where I have to move out of the way, and then he can win my rook back. The beauty of it, though, is that when I take, it's check first. He doesn't have time to move down. So I take with check, and if he moves closer, for example, I'll let him win the knight because I need to prevent him from doing this. So I'll move my rook close or something, and then he can win my knight, but at least he doesn't win my rook. So yeah, in this case I don't know. Sometimes after the puzzle's over, the game is equal. Sometimes these puzzles after you win a piece, the game is just equal. It becomes an equal fight again, which means you were losing and then you found a tactic to kind of save yourself and get back in the game. So either way, it's a good puzzle and it was a good move and a good tactic that won a piece. But if you were losing before you won the piece, it might just equalize. Either way, you're just practicing your tactical skills. We had this puzzle in the first video, except I had to... Okay, I recognize this, yeah. Initially, the queen was here, and I had to just sacrifice the queen up here. Knight takes, and then I promote, also getting my queen back. In this case, the queen's already here, so it's just one less move for me to do. I just take, kill queen, bishop blocks, checkmate. So I recognize that one from the first video, except it was one less move. So sometimes I do that with the algorithms for this computer program for chess.com. Sometimes they'll repeat puzzles, but they'll give you less sequences to do, or less moves to do, or more moves to do, depending on the difficulty. It's the same puzzle. For example, a mate in 1 puzzle, it might have been a mate in 4 puzzle, but when it was a mate in 1, the first 3 moves were done for you. And so a mate in 4, but the first 3 moves are already done for you, then it's just a mate in 1. But if you rewind, it was really a mate in 4 initially, and that becomes a harder puzzle, even though it's the exact same position or game. Okay, that was really annoying. These are all beginner puzzles. Like, that was stupid white. I take with check. See, right now, this queen is preventing me from getting a queen. If I get a queen, queen will take my new queen. But by moving the rook here, I can just take with check. The king has no legal moves. The queen has to take, allowing me to get a queen, and it's checkmate. So, check, checkmate. But that was a very bad move by white. So as you get better with tactics, and as you play in chess tournaments or play online and you get better, your opponents are also getting better, normally, as you move up the rating ladder. So as you get better, your opponents also aren't falling for traps. So a lot of beginners like to attack without calculating. They attack without calculating. They attack and then just hope their opponent doesn't see it. But what happens when your opponent does see it? And then it was actually a really bad move because your opponent saw it. So don't ever play hope chess. Don't gamble. Assume your opponent is a grandmaster, even if they're not. Assume your opponent. Basically, to play chess well, you have to play both sides of the board. You make a move and you are analyzing your opponent's best responses and then your responses to their best responses. Or inferior responses, but assume they see the best moves. If they don't, cool. But you gotta assume they see the best moves, and then do you win a piece anyway, etc. Okay, this is just checkmate in one. Okay, yeah, because the queen, the knight prevents there. Easy. All right, end games. So earlier we had an endgame puzzle where the king, if I chose the wrong square, remember, the king could get in front of the pawn. In this case, it depends. It really depends. This is a win because when I move up, he's going to move here. And then I push the pawn. He has to get off, and then I move up, supporting my new queen. If my king were already here, this would be a draw. Because then I move up with check. This is in this case, if you push the pawn to the 7th rank with check, the king blocks, then you have to go behind, and this is stalemate. The white king has no legal moves, but he's not in check, and it's a draw. So you ultimately do not want to push the pawn up to the 7th rank with check, because it allows the king to block. In this case, well, the king's going to block anyway, but since it's not check, it's not check, which is okay, because it's not check, the king has an escape square. Okay, so you push up without check. That's the key. That's the key for these end games when you have one pawn. You push up as long as it's not check. It's not check. He escapes. I can't get my queen yet because he will eat it. So the king has to go up and support. And now, no matter what white does, I'm going to get a queen. That's enough to win. If you don't know how to win with the king and queen, I recommend looking that up online. Elementary checkmates, checkmate with a king and a queen, and a checkmate with a king and a rook are the two main ones. King and queen are more common because a lot of time in chess, when you can't stop the pawn from promoting, you're going to get a queen. But you have to know how to checkmate with a king and queen. And then a king and rook is a little harder whenever pawns are not available. The reason why, but when there's a pawn, it becomes a queen most of the time. Okay, he moved here. I'm in check. He's attacking my queen, but my queen's defended. I can take. And then he takes back with either pawn or the knight. Why is this not standing out to me? I think I should just take the queen, but I'm in check, so it's hard to have forcing lines when you're in check because you're responding to a threat. I'm in check. So I take the queen, you can just take it back, and I don't see what the big deal is. If I take, he shouldn't take with either pawn, because then I'm attacking this knight twice. Testing. Apologies. My headset died, and I had to quickly go get a charger. There's not an option to pause the. There's not an option to pause the video. I can stop the video, or I can mute my microphone. I wish there's a way to pause. I should have prepared, but apologies. So it took me a minute to go quickly get a cord. I should have mentioned that before, that the battery was low. So you probably thought there was something wrong. I'll post a note in the description of the video saying that I had to quickly go get a charger. So, okay, where was I? I take, if he takes with either pawn, then I will win this knight. And if he takes with knight, that's the thing, though. If he takes with knight, I don't see the big deal. I take rook, he takes rook, no big deal. Oh, but I'm in check, though, is the problem. I hope it's recording, to be honest. We'll find out. I think I'll just, I don't know if it's working right now, to be honest. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video after this puzzle, because I'm not sure if it's working. I'll go ahead and finish this puzzle, but I'm not sure if my microphone's working or not. So this could be all for nothing, so I don't want to continue the video for the rest of the hour if it's not recording. So let's just finish this puzzle, and if it's not there, it's not there. But I take. I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't think this is correct. No, that was correct. I guess it's just, oh, it's a defense puzzle. There's nothing special to win a piece. I was trying to find a way to win the piece, but there is no. It's just the best defense to a check, so it was the right thing to do. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video. Sorry about that. This is 45 minutes, 38 puzzles. I hope this was helpful. I apologize for the headset dying, but I think this is enough for the beginner levels. All right. I'm going to stop and test it before uploading. All right. Thanks a lot.